Hello, and welcome to From Mess to Message, A Journey to Purpose. I am your host, Winfield Sargent, and we are so grateful that you would join us for this installment, which promises to be uplifting, encouraging, and inspiring. Today, we are joined with a phenomenal woman. Her name is Stephenie Williams. Stephenie, welcome to From Mess to Message.
Thank you, Win. Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here.
And we are honored to have you. I remember when developing this segment, and we were talking about doing this segment and highlighting you and bringing you on the show. We realize that this topic that we're dealing with is very important, and that's why we named this segment From Depression to Direction.
Yes.
And depression, it's something, depression and mental illness is something that is not dealt with in the African American and brown communities.
Yes, right.
And so I wanted to come on and share your story. But before we dive into that, would you tell the viewers a little bit about Stephenie Stevenson Williams?
Well, actually, just Stephenie Williams.
Just Williams.
Yes, right. I changed my name officially 2 weeks ago. I changed my name. That's another story. You know,
a whole other show.
Yeah, a whole nother show. So Stephenie Williams, who is Stephenie Williams? Stephenie Williams is a mother. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I was a teenage mother. I had my oldest son at 16 years old and just thought the world was over because he was here and I couldn't finish school. I never thought I would amount to anything, but to God be the glory. You know, I'm so glad that my dreams and my thoughts about myself was not God's dreams and God's thoughts about me. And 6 years ago, I didn't decide, God decided for me to go back to school. And I entered Nyack College 6 years ago, and I graduated with my bachelor's in 2015. From there, I went on to my master's, and now I have my master's in social work, which I established that back in May. Yes.
So, but, you know, you all these great little things, you make it sound so simple, and oh, hooray, and all this stuff. But that was not an easy journey.
No, not at all. No, not at all. It wasn't easy at all. It was very rough.
Yeah. Let's kind of go back to let's go back to literally when you were told you couldn't.
Oh, wow.
And you decided that, the devil's a liar. I'm going to do this. Let's talk about that.
Oh, when I was told, most of my life I was told I couldn't. Wow. Most of my life I was...
It's okay. Take your time. Take your time.
Whew. Most of my life I was told I couldn't. Coming from a mother, I'm the youngest of 8 children. 7 girls, 1 boy. Growing up, I was very sick. I was in and out the hospital until I was 9 years old. I used to have epileptic seizures. And I didn't really go to school until I was 9 years old, 10 years old. So I didn't have many friends. I didn't have many people to talk to besides my siblings. And I remember one teacher, one junior high school teacher. I don't know if I could say his name. His name was Mr. Liedman. And Mr. Liedman told me, because I was wild and crazy. I was an earhead. I didn't listen to what nobody said. My motto was I could do what I want to do when I want to do it and how I want to do it. And I didn't care. People used to say, you're going to die and go to hell. You know, back in those days, you're going to die, you're going to go to hell. And I used to look at people and I used to say, okay, I could go to hell. I'm a disciple of the devil. That's okay. Because I didn't care. I had no direction. I had no direction at all. And Mr. Liebman told me, he said, you're going to be my first student to go to jail, and you're going to be my first student to get pregnant, not knowing at the time that I was pregnant. And I remember picking up a chair and throwing it at him in class. I was so upset. And now I see that I wasn't upset because of the words that he said. I was upset because I believed those words. I believed that I would go to jail. I believed that I wouldn't amount to anything. And I believed that I was nobody. You know, my self-esteem was so low. Even though I laughed and joked around and I was the fun of the party, I had a very, very low self-esteem growing up. Even in my 20s and 30s, my self-esteem was very low. And it all changed when I was diagnosed with bipolarism.
And when were you diagnosed with
I was diagnosed with bipolarism, I think I was 32. I was diagnosed with bipolarism. And being a Christian and coming from an African-American background, I said I wasn't gonna go to counseling and I wasn't gonna take the medication. And one day the Holy Spirit said to me, some things are medical and some things are spiritual. And he showed me that this wasn't a spiritual warfare I was fighting, this was a medical warfare I was fighting. So I decided to take the medicine and I decided to go to counseling. And in counseling, I learned how to change the way I saw myself and the way I saw the world. And once that mindset changed, my whole life changed.
How does that mindset change though? After I can relate to your story growing up and being told that I was this and being labeled before I even knew who I was, and I was told that I wouldn't amount to anything and told that I was lower than the lowest. How do you get to that place?
You have to want to be free. You have to want to be free. You have to get to the place that you want to be free for you and no one else. You have to get to that place that, okay, I have this mental disorder and I'm going to embrace it. I'm not going to fight it anymore, but I'm going to embrace it. Because you know what? It's a reason why God is allowing me to go through this. Because you're not going to go through anything that God don't allow us to go through. And I'm the type of person, I'm an analyst. I like to analyze things. So I sit back and I take the positive out of every negative. So I started sitting back and thinking like, okay, Stephenie, you're diagnosed with bipolarism. What's the positive in this? And at first I saw no positive.
But what is bipolarism?
Bipolarism is a chemical imbalance. Is a chemical imbalance, and it could be triggered by multiple things. It could be triggered by an event. It could even be triggered by food. I realized that corn would trigger my bipolarism episodes. Corn. The sugar in the corn would, or if I ate too much sugar, I would find myself, I would get a rush, but then I would drop. I would be on this high and then I would just go down so low and didn't understand until one day a great friend of mine, Brandon Gibson, he asked me, when did this start? And I realized it started at 19. And that's when it becomes evidence around that age.
Yeah, because you had to look about what was going on in your life, what was being, and that's one of the things we don't look at.
Right.
A lot of the times when symptoms or the mental illness start to show its face, and like everything else in life, we have to trace the source.
Right.
We have to the root of where it started.
Right.
And a lot of times we're not able to stop and say, well, okay, wait a minute, what was going on here? Where was I in my journey? What, because a lot of times if we do that, we could find what triggers our mental illnesses. So tell us about that when you examined at 19.
I examined that. That's when it started. That's when I would get depressed. That's when I would just sometimes look at my son, and I love my son. But I would look at him and not want him. But then in a few days, he'd be my pride and joy again. I remember a few times, this is so emotional. And please don't think I'm crying because I'm in bondage. I'm crying because I'm so free. I feel so good. Because when I look back of all that I've been through and see where God has me now, only thing I could do is give him praise. So I remember one day talking to their grandmother and asking her, would she adopt my son? Because I didn't understand why I was having these feelings, and I was scared that one day I may even hurt him. And as time went on, I just learned how to deal with it. And I learned how to deal with it. I always say I learned how to manipulate my mind. So when I felt the episodes coming on, I would go and just say, oh, I'm tired, and go lay down. Or I would be like, people would be like, why are you so quiet? And I'd be like, oh, I just don't feel like being bothered. I just feel like being quiet. I can't be quiet sometimes. And no one was the wiser of what I was going through for almost 20 years. No one was the wiser.
Because we tend to, as African Americans or whomever, if we're not able to explain it or totally understand it, we tend to be like, oh, she's just going through,
She's just going through.
She's just going through, let's just pray for her.
Yeah, everything is prayer.
Yeah, and sometimes I always tell people, yes, pray for me, please pray for me. But sometimes I need a little bit more than prayer, because we go through this life where we grow up, they want to pray it away. They want to, we're gonna just take you to the pastor and the deacons, and they gonna lay hands on you,
and you gonna be cured.
Yes.
No, it don't work like that. No.
And people don't realize that. And then what happens is they go to these so-called great men and women, and then when it doesn't work,
they blame God.
They blame God also, but they go deeper
into their depression. You're absolutely right.
Into what they're dealing with.
Absolutely.
And I know with my personal mental illness, I had to, because I knew what I was doing. I was running. Every time something would happen, I didn't face it. Like, I was going through an eviction. I knew the marshal was coming that morning.
Right.
I went shopping. and I went, and my friend was driving by, and there go all my stuff, and people this is in Washington, D.C., in Northeast D.C. People just going through my stuff.
Right.
And he like, ain't that your stuff? I was like, child, let's go. Let's keep going.
Right.
And my aunt saw me. She saw me. She said some words I can't say on TV.
Right.
And ran the truck down. She said, what is wrong with you? You crazy? And I said to myself, I think I am. I think I am. In order for you to actually look at your life on the sidewalk.
Right.
And you're just willing to walk away
from it. Right.
Something's got to be wrong.
Right.
That was when I started going into therapy. I started saying, something is really wrong, because we were raised to say, well, get over it.
Right.
That's the easiest thing. Child, get over it, child. You'll get over it.
Gotta make a way.
Yes.
Stop.
Yes.
You're too much. It's not. Because they don't understand that sometimes your words are so scrambled in your head, and you're trying to figure stuff out, and if you've never been through mental illness, you will never understand.
Yeah.
I don't call it mental. We don't have mental illnesses. I call us unique individuals.
Oh, yes.
Yes. I call us, we're a unique individual.
Yes. Yeah. They just drop a little extra in our DNA.
That's right.
And that's why we
That's right.
Yeah, because I remember because we were on our medicine at
the same time. You encouraged me, because you was in counseling and I wasn't in counseling, and you encouraged me to go to counseling, because I always had in my head from my mom and my aunts and everyone, I love y'all guys, but y'all was telling us the wrong things. I love y'all.
Yeah.
That, if you go see the people, they're gonna take your kids away. Oh, you ain't gonna never get a good job if you go see the people. I needed to see those people. Yes, the counselor, the psychiatrist, the psychotherapist. I needed to see them to get the tools that I needed in order to conquer this bipolarism.
Yeah.
And how many years? It's been, I was on a medication for 8 months. Now, I'm not telling you that you're going to be on the medication for just 8 months. I was on the medication for exactly 8 months. And God delivered me from it. I have not been on the medication in 5 years.
Yeah.
In 5 years. But that also alters my diet, things that I eat. I still try my best to stay away from the sweets. You know, the things that I know that's going to trigger it, I try to stay away from it.
Yeah, and I tell people when it comes, that journey back to yourself,
Right.
it's not an easy journey, especially when you're dealing with your mental makeup, and especially if you don't understand why it's happening.
Why, right.
Because that's the hardest question I used to ask. Why is this happening to me?
Yes.
Why am I going through this? And then you go through the blame game. You go through the blame game.
Yes.
Ooh, that blame game can be dangerous.
Deadly.
Very.
Deadly. I remember when you said, I remember a conversation we had, and I will never forget these words. I said, why me, G? All that I do for God, all that I do for other people, why me? And you know, I remember what you said to me. You said, why not you? You said, why not you? And I was like, what you mean, why not me? I do so much. If I'm on this medication, I can't minister. I can't help people the way that I feel like I need to be helping people. And you said, well, why not you, Stephenie? And then that made me, it didn't catch on right then and there, but maybe a year later, I caught on to what you were saying. Why not you? And I said, you know what, God, right? Why not me? Because you know, if you allow me to go through this, and when I come out of it, I'm gonna tell people about it. I'm gonna let them know. Nobody could shut my mouth. I'm screaming from the mountaintops. Hey, listen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I tell people, people always told me. They said, and they said, you know, you tell your business too much. Or you talk too much. And it used to think, so I stopped telling my story.
Right.
And then I realized, no. And I remember somebody told me, I don't remember. They said, keep saying what you're saying because you might say the right thing to the right person at the right time. So I constantly kept saying what I kept saying, and I started saying it to the right people just at the time when they need it.
Right.
And that's when I decided, you know what? I'm not just going to be partially transparent. I'm going to be fully transparent. Because we all say, oh, I'm so transparent. No. You telling the part that look real pretty.
Real pretty.
Real pretty.
You're right. No, tell everything.
And that's going to not have the saints judge you.
Right.
You know, because that's the other thing that we deal with when we talk about the saints and all of that stuff. And the Bible says don't judge and all these wonderful things, but that's the biggest sin that we have going on in our churches and in our religious building. Not our churches, we are the church. I should say our religious building. Because we tend to just want to judge and not know. And not know, and we don't realize what that does, how that hurts individuals. And so I think that one of the things, especially when it deals with, like I said, our mental DNA, we are not getting the proper information so that we can deal with what we need to deal with. Because we were told to, in everything, oh, don't make a fuss, Garrett, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like, I thank God my mother, initially when I was acting out and everything in school and they wanted to put me on medication as a kid, my mother said, no, you are not turning my child into a zombie. I see what this does. And I never did it, but when I got older and I tried it, I understood what she meant. Because that medication, talk about your experience with the medication and how you actually tricked your mind.
The medication, I always say the medication was the best thing I ever did. It was the best thing I ever did. The medication, however, it was the best thing I ever did, but I had to take some time off work just to get used to, because the doctor tell you take it in the morning. But if you take it in the morning, you're a zombie. Okay, so I had to really take some time and see what works for my body, because everybody's different. I found out that taking it at night worked for me. Taking it at night worked for me. I woke up in the morning, I was rejuvenated, I was ready to go. However, 7 o'clock I had to take it. By 10 o'clock I was asleep. And I said that was my little diet too, because I lost so much weight because listen, you don't be up eating all night. Because your mind is wandering, you up eating and eating. So I really loved the medicine. I had embraced the medicine and I was like, you know what, God, if it's gonna work for me, I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take it. And honestly, I was at the point I couldn't manipulate my mind anymore. That's why I had to get on the medicine. And everything that was going on. You know, I had so much, I was in a depression from, you know, things in my childhood that happened that I suppressed. And it started coming to the surface. Okay, then I had, okay, let's start with at 15 years old, 14 or 15, I was raped. Okay, I suppressed it. I suppressed it for many years. To be honest with you, I just really dealt with the rape maybe 4 years ago. Like really, really dealt with it. Wrote a paper about it. Okay, the death of my son. When my son died, it was the end of the world. I was just, depression wasn't the word. I was like, I was depressed before. This is worse than depression. You know, and it was just like, wow. But it was all of those things, you know, daddy issues, mommy issues, you know, being the youngest. You know, it was all of those things that built me up to say, okay, you can't do this by yourself no more. It's no more manipulating the mind. It's no more, okay, I'm just gonna go take a nap and you taking, your naps are 5, 6, 7 hours. That's not a nap. That's not a nap. A nap is, you know, you go take a little half an hour rest. But when you go to 3 and 4 and 5 hours, that's a problem. That's a problem. So I could not manipulate my mind anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. And I felt myself going deeper and deeper and deeper into this slump. And sometimes, to be honest with you, I couldn't bring myself out of it. I could not come out of it. And I would be depressed for weeks and months. The longest I was depressed was a month. I couldn't go to work. I could barely take care of my children and my husband. And I think that's when it really snapped that, Stephenie, no thinking. That's when it really hit me that something is really wrong. And I called my union rep and I told her, something is wrong with me. I didn't want to bathe. And I work with students. And I'm like, I've seen this pattern before. I've seen this pattern. So the manipulation was no longer there. I tried everything. So now I had to result in getting help, going to counseling, being put on medication. And honestly, it took me almost 2 years before I would take the medication. I tried everything. Okay, I read books on bipolarism. Okay, they said change your diet. They said stay away from this, try exercising. And that was all the holistic way. It wasn't working for me, so I had to take the medication. If I was to tell anyone out there that's going through depression, the first thing I would do, if you don't have someone that you could really talk to, the first thing I would do would call the hotline. I would call the hotline.
But you know, there's so many people who are in shame.
Yeah.
And they don't, you know, that's not the first place they would call, you know. What else should they do? What else can they do?
Try talking to someone that they really trust. You know, we always tell our children, if someone touch you, you know, you find someone that you could trust to talk to. Same thing with mental health. If you feel like you have a problem, find someone that you can talk to that you feel like you can trust. And they're not going to be judgmental. They're not going to judge you. It could be your pastor. It could be your sister, your brother, a friend, a coworker. It could be anyone. It could be anyone. Find someone that you can trust. And if you know you're diagnosed, start reading on it.
doing your due diligence.
Yes,
Because that's
understanding.
the thing, because I tell people, if you don't do your due diligence, you can be fed any single thing.
Anything, yes.
Because then somebody else is doing the work for you.
Right.
And then they're interpreting it the way, as far as their knowledge is able, because in every community, or actually, well, I learned this when I was in jail. You got your jail lawyer, you got your jail doctor, you got your jail priest. So it's the same thing. You got your jail psychiatrist. Yo, you don't need that, Yo, I think that you should just drink a bottle of this. Go. And then they go into the thing and they unnecessarily over medicate their problem. And then it comes, they then, when they use something else to mask the hurt, they then develop a whole other addiction.
Yes.
But it's so important that we find, and that's one of the most important, find some counseling, find someone that can help you, find someone you can talk to, because that's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing to step out of yourself and say, I need help.
That's right. That's right, it is. I recommend when you look for a counselor, you interview the counselor. You have specific questions that you ask the counselor. And one of the questions I would ask the counselor, have you ever been depressed? Have you ever been depressed? Have you ever lost a loved one? I remember when my son passed away and I went to seek counseling. They recommended, Downstate Hospital, they recommended that I seek counseling because that was hard. It was very hard. And that was one of the things I asked the counselor. I'm listening to this lady speak and I'm looking at her body language. I said, she can't relate to me. So I had to ask, I said, is your mom and dad still alive? And she said, yes. I said, do you have any siblings? She was the only child. I said, have you ever lost someone that you really loved? And she was like, no. I said, so you can't relate to me. And I got up and I left. And I never looked back again. I said, you're telling me what you learned in the books, which is great. That's fine. But you can't relate to me. You can't. That's like a married couple going to a counselor that's never been married. How can you tell me what to do in my marriage if you've never been through it? That's my.
Well, Stephenie, when I tell you, we can go on
yes,
and on,
we could go
but
on.
we're a half-hour show, and we can't go any further. But just any last words of inspiration, just look into that camera and just give something to inspire someone.
If I have to say anything to anyone, with or without mental health, the first thing I would say is do not judge people with mental health issues. That's first and foremost. The second thing I would say, if you have a mental health problem, seek help. Seek help. There's nothing wrong with seeking help. It's nothing wrong with seeking help. Trust me. That's how my whole life changed, by going into counseling. I registered in school shortly after because the counselor showed me that I was more than I thought I was. Okay, I wasn't what people said I was, and I wasn't what people said I was going to be, but I was a great individual. And I learned that I love to serve people. That's why I went into social work. All my life, I love to serve people. So I would say, listen, don't listen to what people were saying. Go and seek the help that you need. And trust me, you'll be able to help those same people that's talking about you. You'll be able to help them in the future. It's your testimony. Just look at it like that. Anything you go through is a testimony. Your testimony is not for you, but it's to help someone else.
Stephenie, we thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
And remember, your diagnosis does not determine your destination. With everything you do, always remember to lead with love.